economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something.
U.S. weapons manufacturer Lockheed Martin is reportedly pitching new jobs for Canada. But that offer depends on Ottawa sticking to its plan to buy Lockheed's F35 fighter jet.
Buying a fighter jet isn't just about buying a single plane. It's a commitment to a future relationship with the company that sold you it.
In March, Canada said it would review its planned acquisition of 88 F-35s due to changing geopolitics and a need to secure more defence production at home.
Hey guys, welcome back. What if I told you that Canada's biggest defense deal in decades, the one meant to modernize its air force, has quietly turned into both a financial trap and a political weapon? The plan to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin was once celebrated as a $19 billion milestone. But now, that price tag has surged to somewhere between $27.7 and $30.2 billion, nearly 50% higher than promised. And here's the part you won't see in the headlines. It's not just about cost overruns. Washington, under Trump's watch, has already warned of serious consequences if Ottawa dares to walk away. 16 jets are locked in by legal contracts, but the real leverage is political. Trump and his team are framing this as a test of loyalty, hinting that Canada could face retaliation in trade or even cracks in NORAD if it doesn't fall in line. So the question is, has this deal become less about Canada's security and more about America's pressure? And how much freedom does Ottawa really have when its biggest ally is also its biggest enforcer? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. The pressure on Canada isn't just financial, it's coming straight from Washington. Behind the polished speeches, U.S. officials have been blunt. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra warned that if Canada pulls back, it could jeopardize NORAD itself, because the system is built on the assumption that everyone flies the same jet. In plain terms, no F-35, no full seat at the defense table. And the threats don't stop there. Words like negative consequences and serious consequences have been dropped in diplomatic meetings, a clear signal that Trump's White House is ready to punish Canada if it dares to step out of line. It's not just about defense, it's about trade. Mark Carney's decision to review the contract has already been described in Washington as a troublemaker move, the kind of irritation that could spill into everything from tariffs to cross-border deals. Even Canadian giants like Bombardier quietly fear their U.S. contracts could be targeted next. So ask yourself, is this really about fighter jets, or is the F-35 just the stick America uses to keep Canada in check? If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. And faced with that kind of pressure, Ottawa made a move that caught everyone off guard. Instead of bowing to Washington, Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a full review of the F-35 deal in March 2025. On the surface, it looked like a technical audit. But in reality, it was something bigger, a signal that Canada wanted more than just new jets. Carney framed it as a matter of economic diversification in the middle of a trade war, a chance to ensure billions in defense spending didn't just leave the country, but fueled Canadian industry at home. That's why Defense Minister Bill Blair was tasked with studying alternatives, including the possibility of assembling the aircraft on Canadian soil. The idea wasn't just about saving money, it was about creating jobs, securing technology transfer, and making defense procurement serve a domestic agenda. The timeline was clear. The review would wrap up by the end of September 2025, just months before key budget decisions. And while this was unfolding, Ottawa quietly signed a $6 billion contract with Australia for a cutting-edge AOTHR radar system, proof that Canada was willing to look beyond Washington for critical defense technology. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. The government was testing the waters of independence. The question hanging in the air was simple. Would Canada really dare to push this further? Or was this review just a bargaining chip before returning to the fold? And that's where the European wildcard enters the picture. While Washington insists the F-35 is the only viable path, Saab's Gripen E has quietly emerged as the alternative no one expected Canada to seriously consider. On paper, it isn't just another jet. It's a package deal. Saab has pledged to assemble and maintain the aircraft inside Canada, effectively seeding an entire defense industry that would create jobs, transfer skills, and give Ottawa a measure of independence it hasn't had in decades. The economics are striking. Operating a Gripen costs roughly $8,000 per flight hour, a fraction of the $35,000 to $47,000 needed to keep an F-35 in the air. For a country already watching the price tag of the F-35 spiral upward, that number alone is hard to ignore. Add to that the Gripen's ability to fly from Arctic runways or temporary airstrips, with readiness rates hovering around 80 to 90%, and suddenly the choice doesn't look so far-fetched. But here's the catch. To Washington, a Canadian pivot to Gripen isn't independence, it's defection. U.S. officials have hinted that choosing Saab would mean choosing irrelevance, cutting Canada off from the ecosystem of shared upgrades, intelligence, and interoperability that the F-35 program was designed to guarantee. In other words, the promise of self-reliance comes with the shadow of isolation. So the dilemma deepens. Is the Gripen Canada's ticket to industrial sovereignty, or the first step toward strategic exile? And yet, despite all the talk of alternatives, the F-35 still carries a weight the Gripen can't match. For many in Ottawa and the military, it isn't just an aircraft, it's a ticket into the next era of warfare. The program is designed as the only reliable bridge towards sixth-generation fighters, like the future F-47, where stealth, AI integration, and global data networks will define who stays relevant on the battlefield. To walk away from the F-35 would mean closing the door on that club. But the promise comes with cracks. The much-anticipated Block 4 upgrade, meant to deliver the most advanced capabilities, has already slipped by 5 years and run $6 billion over budget. Even now, the F-35's mission-ready rate hovers between 30 and 50%, far below the Gripen's 80 to 90%. For a jet that is supposed to be the backbone of Western air power, those numbers are quietly unsettling. And then there's the hidden dependency. Every software patch, every sensitive component is controlled in the United States. Canada may own the jets, but the keys to keep them flying, literally and digitally, sit firmly in Washington's hands. That raises the uncomfortable question, is buying the F-35 a path to power, or just another layer of reliance on America? And this is where the stakes move beyond numbers and flight hours, straight into the heart of Canada's alliances. Choosing the F-35 means locking in deeper integration with the U.S. Air Force, ensuring Canada's pilots and systems remain fully synced with NORAD operations. For many defense planners, that continuity isn't just convenient, it's survival in a crisis where seconds and shared data could decide the outcome. But the Gripen option flips that logic. Yes, it could create jobs and industrial independence at home, but it also risks weakening interoperability with allies who are building their entire air defense around the F-35 ecosystem. The choice, in effect, is between economic sovereignty and seamless coordination. At the same time, Ottawa has quietly widened its scope. Talks are already underway with Germany and South Korea for new submarine projects, and a major radar deal has been signed with Australia. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has even opened discussions with the European Union on reducing reliance on U.S. defense guarantees. Taken together, these moves suggest that Canada isn't just shopping for jets, it's testing whether a more independent security posture is possible. So the question lingers, is this diversification a smart hedge for the future, or the first crack in a relationship that has underpinned North American defense for 70 years? And here's the part most people don't see. Walking away from the F-35 isn't a clean break. It could trap Canada in a far more expensive nightmare than staying the course. The first 16 jets are already locked in by contract, which means that if Ottawa chose to pivot midstream, it wouldn't be a clean swap. Instead, the Royal Canadian Air Force would be left managing a split fleet, forced to keep two completely different fighter systems flying at once. For military planners, that isn't a compromise. It's a worst-case scenario. Think about what that actually means in practice. Pilots would need to be trained on two platforms with entirely different flight systems, aims, and combat doctrines. Technicians would need to master two sets of maintenance routines. Supply chains would have to be duplicated, with spare parts sourced from two continents. Even air bases might need separate infrastructure tailored to each aircraft. All of those layers add costs that don't show up in the initial brochures, but would pile onto the defense budget year after year. And while the Gripen's lower operating cost looks appealing in isolation, once Canada adds the price of integrating it into NORAD's network, plus the adjustments needed to fit Canadian requirements, the savings begin to vanish. A jet that looks cheaper to fly can become more expensive to sustain when it's the odd one out in a system designed around another aircraft. Then there's the momentum factor. The F-35 program is not just about planes on the runway. It's about being plugged into the largest and most advanced upgrade cycle in modern defense history. Every year, the jet receives new sensors, new software, new interoperability features, developments funded by a pool of allies far larger than Canada could ever afford on its own. Stepping out of that cycle would mean missing out on the economic spin-offs and technological advances that ripple through aerospace industries worldwide. The real danger, then, is that in trying to buy independence, Canada could end up with the worst of both worlds: higher costs, fragmented capabilities, and a seat on the sidelines of the very system it once helped to build. In other words, escaping dependence might simply create a deeper, costlier form of it. And so Canada finds itself at a crossroads. One path keeps the country tightly bound to Washington, with the F-35 ensuring deep integration, interoperability, and a front-row seat in the future of Allied defense, though at the price of spiraling costs and long-term dependence. The other path, through the Gripen, promises industrial independence, lower operating costs, and more control over procurement, but risks pulling Canada out of the US-led ecosystem that has defined its security for generations. There's no perfect solution here, no single right answer, only trade-offs. Which matters more, staying in lockstep with America or taking a gamble on building industrial sovereignty in Europe? That's the debate now facing Canadian policymakers and ultimately the Canadian public. So the question remains, when the cost of security collides with the price of independence, which side of the scale should Canada tip? Thanks for watching. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.